Greetings, everyone, and welcome to That's a Take. My name is Bruce James Bales, and I will be your host on this filmmaking podcast journey. Wanted to take some time and welcome you to the first take of the podcast, and to tell you a little bit about the podcast, about myself, and why I am doing this. So That's a Take is an educational filmmaking podcast focused on specific topics and projects. That's a Take is comprised of conversations with experts, case studies, and topic-focused episodes. I am your host, and I am based in Des Moines, Iowa. I am a cinematographer and filmmaker working in the narrative, commercial, and documentary spaces. And I also have an education background. Those things and many other factors have led me to starting this podcast. But really, the genesis of this podcast is wanting to give back, wanting to share the information that I am learning as I go along in my filmmaking career, because I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to a lot of really talented, intelligent filmmakers. This podcast is intended to be an educational resource for filmmakers of all levels and abilities, and I want to engage in a dialogue with you. So if you have any feedback, questions for guests, or questions for myself, please reach out at that'satakepod@gmail.com. So for our first guest on That's a Take, I wanted to go to the beginning of my filmmaking journey and talk to someone who I've grown alongside. Her name is Marissa Vonn. She is a director, writer, and first assistant director based in Los Angeles, California. Marissa loves telling compelling stories with unexpected protagonists and moments that tug on your heartstrings. Family dramas, cerebral thrillers, and anything with an authentic lead character are Marissa's preferred projects. She has a passion for creating complex roles that challenge actors and absolutely loves collaborating with her cast to bring performances that feel authentic and powerful. Marissa grew up in Iowa and still returns frequently. Her past few films, Next of Kin, Domicile, and Knee-High, were all filmed in Iowa with frequent collaborators, Def Productions. She loves bringing together crews that turn into friends and keeps a strict no assholes policy. She's currently prepping for her next short, Dryland, and on a day-to-day basis, Marissa can be found in the credits of feature films and short films as a first assistant director. And without further ado, here's our conversation about the foundations of independent filmmaking and how to get started making short films. Just kind of starting off, you are a director, but you work as a first AD in Los Angeles.
I do. My friend Emily, Emily, recently made this perfect comparison. She's like, it's your career, but in a different font. She's like, sometimes that font is Wingdings. She's right.
Often that
font is Wingdings. And you know what? It's a great ride.
Filmmaking is Wingdings.
Filmmaking is Wingdings.
A lot.
Actually, it is. But yeah, I do. I work as a first assistant director in Los Angeles as a career in Wingdings. And that has taught me a lot about filmmaking on different scales.
Yep.
That ties into how I make movies and how I don't make movies.
Yeah. So that's a great segue. You're killing it already.
Crushing it. Segue.
Because we're talking today about how we got started making low budget, specifically short films.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're starting here is because that's where most people start. And that's where I think a lot of people have questions. And one of the points of this podcast is to be an educational tool. So I figured, why not just start at the beginning?
Start at the very beginning.
Yeah.
How?
Yeah. So, but the setting your career up is good for people to know because you've seen different budgets. The budget, if you're allowed to say, for the Portland feature was much greater than anything you've worked on before.
Correct.
What was that roughly?
That was $12 million.
Okay. So you have.
Bonks. That's bananas out of. That is a number I can't even comprehend.
Yes. And so we have not worked at that level.
Right.
As a director, DP tandem.
We'll get there.
Yes,
Correct.
we will. But that's not the focus of today. But just for reference to the audience, you have worked on those bigger budget things. Yeah. So we're going to kind of compare and contrast a little bit.
Yeah, you have to.
As far as how you do the lower end.
Right. Because there's definitely, I think, some things that projects with no money do better than things with money.
Yeah. And so just starting off, what do you think those things are? What do you think, from your experience, how have you sort of existed in the low budget realm and been successful?
I think the thing that the low budget, no budget does better than large number budget, or even not even necessarily large budget, just any budget, because we work so much in the true no budget, because no budget to our industry is $5 million and under, which is bananas because having $1 million even would be out of this world. Like, that's so much money. And I think the thing that no budget, low budget does better than those movies is community.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not calling people, you're not calling strangers to work for no money. You're not calling strangers to like help with your passion project, help tell your like personal story that you've been noodling on for years. You don't call strangers for that.
Mm-hmm.
You call the people you already know.
Yes.
Whereas when you have $1 million, you can call whoever you want.
Yeah. And you, in your career, have not been bashful about asking for favors and asking for people to do things. And for some reason, you know, growing up in the Midwest and making films in the Midwest, that's something that works really well.
Mm-hmm.
But in the greater industry, that's not something that happens because they just pay people.
Right.
So we're walking a thin line here of like, we just want to also preface that we like to pay people.
Love to pay people.
But when we first started,
love to pay people.
We like to make movies.
Correct.
So we created a community of people that wanted to make movies. How did you go about doing that? How did you get people to be down for the cause?
I will start where we started because, like I said, the before times are not real to me. And that was truly before knowing like our little cohort, it was calling strangers. And that's like, it's so awkward, especially one of the first things I ever, well, hold on. Post-college. The first thing I did out of college, I made with people that I was working in reality TV with.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody had the same desire where they're like, wouldn't it be cool if we just had a script? Wouldn't it be cool if we knew what we were going to do today? And I'm like, yes. And you can do that in this really cool thing called scripted content. So it started there. And then the next thing after that was truly calling strangers and like hoping for the best. And like obviously got a short out of it, but it was a weird... It's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had worked with you on something, and I remember this is so specific, and like we've talked about this because we have different memories of when we met.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think we met on that web series, and I'm like, no, we met in the lobby of the Des Moines Register during that weird that Showtime show.
Yeah, the circus.
The circus, and you were like, oh, I have a production company. I was like, this is the coolest person I've ever met. This is a grown up.
Fooled ya.
Fooled ya. This is a grown up who like has ambitions to make movies. I was like, I'm gonna lock that information down for when the time comes. And then like the next year maybe.
It was within the next 12 months we were on set of the web series,
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, you're still doing the thing. Because you know, sometimes people aren't doing the thing anymore. And then I reached out to you, which at that point you were kind of a stranger. And I was like, remember how you said that you have a production company and you want to make movies? What if we did a proof of concept for a feature? The fucking audacity. And I was like, what if we made a proof of concept? Because there's a filmmaker I really admire, Kat Candler, who had done a proof of concept for a feature and it was successful. And I was like, okay, is this how it happens?
Yeah.
And so I reached out to you, and then I sent you the whole... Actually, I think I brought you a physical printed copy of the script.
Which I appreciated. Anytime someone gives me a physical copy of the script, like, you have me. I'm a physical medium type of person.
You so are. And I remember, because I printed it on those half pages, and I brought it to you, and I was like, here's the whole script. But we're only going to do this sequence.
Yeah.
And then I just remember, like, the process was so fun. And also, I knew so little about the scripted world that I had to lean on you, and you brought the whole crew, like JB and Spencer and Nick. Was Nick there? Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, yes, he was in the behind the scenes photos. And then the like 4 people that I knew in Indiana.
Yeah.
Also, you came to Indiana.
Yeah, which was a blast.
Which is so crazy. And then we filmed that, and I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, you get addicted quick.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh my God, a script? Like having the thought, the time to do pre-pro. I love pre-pro.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that too. That's a big part of like how I think you're successful at making indie movies is what you do before you actually get to set.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that.
So important. And like getting to do that. And then I was like, I feel like we had a good connection immediately. And I was like, okay, we can do this again.
Yeah.
And then we did immediately, like months later.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that you started off by finding like-minded people that were sort of the same level as you. So that's one tip we have for indie filmmakers, right?
Yes.
Is to
network. You're going to love this. God, I hope you love this. Network laterally.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Truly, it's like the people on your same level are who you have to talk to, because the people above you are doing things at a different scale.
Yes.
And like, yes, network with them, obviously, but the people beside you have the experience that you don't, potentially, in like a different department, whatever. 4 people on the same level can make something together.
Yeah. And that approach really, from our experience, has helped build community as well, because we're all sort of
Yeah.
at the same level. So we're all learning the same things kind of at the same time.
Exactly.
So really trying to find a group of people that feel the same way about filmmaking and the process as you, right? And
Yeah.
then continuing to bring those people back. A lot of the people we've worked with have been on all the movies.
I've been on everything. I've been on everything. And then also, like, you're building your community, so as you step up the ladder, like, they come with you.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of have that built-in crew, built-in support, built-in community. It's there. And also, it's like a huge selling point for outside forces that like are looking for whatever position you and your friends do.
Yeah.
When you get to go and say like, oh, and I come with my first AC, my second AC, my sound person, like all that, they're like, oh, full crew for only having to find one contact? Great.
Yeah, that's a good point. And even now we've gotten to the point, and we won't talk about this much today, but where people are hiring us and we're able to bring the crew.
Yeah, which
to
is
do
awesome.
the thing.
Yeah.
Because that's the goal.
That's always the goal.
And so really, like, we're talking about continually bringing on the same people to not only develop the films that we're making, but our shorthand, the way we communicate with each other. So what about the content, the story, the film? Like, is there some advice you can give to up and coming filmmakers about what to film? Because I think one thing that you and I have seen when we read scripts is scripts that are great, but scripts that have a scope that is not attainable.
Right.
So can you talk about, like, when you were writing these scripts, what kind of stories were you thinking about telling that were actually like stories that we could put on screen without having to spend an arm and a leg?
Right. I think it comes down to knowing the strengths of your crew and knowing the strengths of the people in your community. So knowing what your actors can do and knowing like what is the niche for them if they have one, or like what you think their niche could be. And then writing, it's so hard to say this, to be like, write not what you know, but to write within a scale, because then it feels so limiting. But sometimes creative limits make you more creative. So writing for places that you know you have access to. I feel like that's the biggest one, is like, don't write something that takes place in Mars for your first short film, or like something that's been like in a museum, or something that you know is like exists but is really hard to get. Write for places that you know you can film, like outside, almost anywhere, your own home, your friends' houses. Like, you work in a restaurant, write it for that restaurant so you can shoot when you're closed. Like, I feel like locations is the biggest part of that, and it's so hard to like say, oh, limit yourself when you're writing. But if you are writing with an eye on production, like say you're writing you've written 30 short films, but you haven't produced any of them because, it's on Mars, it's in space, it's at the zoo, it's whatever. And now you're thinking, okay, I need to write something that I know I can shoot. The location.
Yeah.
The location, and like keeping it contained with your cast numbers. Like not writing something that has 7 people in it for your first thing, so that you can actually, as a director, focus on the performances.
Yeah.
And not, did we get everybody's coverage? Does this make sense? Like, that's important.
Yeah, and to springboard off that, if you know you can pull off space, if you know you can pull off Mars, then write that script. But just make sure that it's something you can actually pull off, right?
Yeah.
And furthermore, using not only locations, but all the resources that you have. So if someone has a cool car, or someone has access to, some interesting prop, or
some weird thing.
And then even actors, like knowing that your friend could be this person.
Yeah.
So really, I think what you're saying, and you can tell me, is like all the things you have access to, those are sort of the strengths that you can build a project around, correct?
Yes, exactly. And also like knowing what of that is unique
Mm-hmm.
and like what's not super popular in films at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Because then this is so far down the road from this part, but like thinking about the festival of it all. Like if you're doing your, not saying send your first short film to festivals, but you might want to, and you need something that stands out.
Yeah. So do you think that it's best? I'll back up here. I heard a phrase from some filmmakers I really admire, and they said that basically you should start in your own backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an approach that you took when you first started making these, is writing stories about where you were from and spaces that you were familiar with? And do you think that's a good tactic for people starting out?
Yeah, 100%. Because you can write that with authority and you can write that with a specific voice that's unique to you. Like, sure, I grew up in a tumble with, 25,000 other people. They're not going to have the same view of XYZ as I do. They didn't have the same lived experience, and nobody does. So, like, if you take your literal backyard, nobody knows that the way that you do. Nobody sees it how you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a very good approach.
Yeah.
For like setting, not necessarily location, but like time period, setting of like emotional setting, whatever. I think that's a really good approach.
Yeah. And so one thing we're going to do on this podcast too is do case studies where
Yeah.
I have filmmakers on to talk about a specific project, past, present, or future. And one project that we worked on that you were the first AD on was called Thick as Thieves. And we literally filmed in my backyard.
And your bedroom.
In my bedroom. And all of our locations were within I'd say a 10-block radius of my house. So truly a neighborhood film.
Yeah.
And just to give the audience an idea, this film was conceived and written by me, and it was conceived by going on walks in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And seeing the bodega down the street that I love, and seeing a park down the street that I love, and then luckily having a filmmaker friend that lived in the neighborhood who had a perfect garage for us to use. Yeah, the house, yeah. So I think there is something to be said with starting with what you actually have access to. And sometimes, like you said, it's your house.
Yeah.
That's a great place to start.
Sometimes it's just your house. That's my first short film out of college. Mm-hmm. I was working in reality TV, and we were scouting this neighborhood in Indianapolis. And I remember we were like driving on the street, and it's this weird like 3-block neighborhood, and there's a fountain in the center of each block, like in the street.
Very cool.
It's very Wes Anderson. And I was like, ooh, I want to shoot something here. Mm-hmm. And then literally 3 months later, I moved to that neighborhood. Literally, I lived above one of those fountains. And I like hadn't written the thing, hadn't like actually planned to shoot anything. And then I moved there. And then I was like, I can actually shoot here now. And it turns out one of my friends actually lived next door.
There you go.
It was so strange. And then I was like, oh, we can like actually make something here. And like the neighborhood doesn't care. Because I live here, my friend lives here. And yeah, it's seeing it in a light of like, I have access to this and it's interesting to me because I know it so well.
Yeah, you see it every day.
You see it every day.
Yeah, and doing something that's familiar to you is probably a good place to start too, right? Because you can write from a place that is really a place of knowledge.
Yeah, and it's less scary because doing the first one is horrifying.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we don't say enough is that it's okay if the first one's bad.
It's so okay. The first one should be bad.
It's okay if the first 10 are bad.
It's okay. Literally. It's so fine. The first few, they're supposed to suck.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be good. You're not trying to get on the Oscar shortlist with the first one.
Yeah.
You're just trying to do it.
What like mental tactics did you give to starting out filmmakers to not get hung up on that?
It's hard. It's really hard. There's a Carrie Fisher quote that's stay afraid but do it anyway. And that's like the thing that got me through the first probably 6. It's like it's scary because like there's a lot of people counting on you to like finish the project.
Yeah.
Finish it. They're not even counting on you to make it good. They just want you to finish it.
But one thing that we talk about is not taking things personal, right? Like,
yeah.
And also what we're doing is almost never that serious to take it personal.
No, the shit's fun.
It's supposed to be fun.
It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah. But also there's a regimented portion of filmmaking that is important.
Yeah.
So when you're on set of these indie projects, what sort of parameters are you hoping to instill on set? Like, what sort of things are you hoping people buy into?
I think on set when I'm directing, I'm trying to create an environment that is supportive of craft and of art and of storytelling, but also one where it's still okay to make mistakes. Nobody's going to be mad at you. Like, we're still just making a movie. Like, it feels like I'm trying to create a place where people feel safe to do their best work, but also aren't scared to try something new that could make them better in whatever department they're in. That's always the hope. And also that people have a good time and want to come back and do it again.
Yeah.
I don't want people to like come to one of our sets and be like, I don't want to work in the industry anymore. Because those sets exist. They're real. And I don't ever want to be part of one. Or part of one that like perpetuates the stereotypes of the bad side of filmmaking.
Yeah. Which is not what we're focused on
Correct.
at all. It's completely anti what we're focused on.
Yeah.
Creating sets that have respect and a humanity to them.
Exactly. There's I went to like a Zoom class. I'm not going to remember any more information about it, but it was called Creating a Culture of Humanity on Set. And I was like, the fact that we have to have a class about this is so upsetting. And the fact that like this is actually really great that they have done this person who founded this and like taught this Zoom class teaches it to like big studio companies.
That's
like,
wonderful.
I was like, that's so great. Hate that we have to do this because we're all people. We should be able to do this naturally, but so glad that this service exists, that like they're sending people to like talk with all the above the line crew and like basically remind them that people are people. And then they also serve a purpose on set when needed. Like they can come mediate disagreements and stuff like that. And I was like, that's it. Like this is such a good step forward that like people are remembering like, oh, humans.
Yeah.
All right, people. Because that's so important.
It is. It's important in any sort of labor environment, especially one as intense as filmmaking.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to hear that as well. Kind of changing course a little bit to going back to resources. We talked about the resources that filmmakers have at their like disposal as far as personal resources, locations, actors, friends, props. But what greater resources are there for people that they might overlook when they're first making films? And maybe they'll overlook them because they feel like they're out of their reach.
Yeah.
But like and you can talk about it specifically for Iowa, like what resources were there to help you make movies that you would recommend indie filmmakers using?
Your local production databases like Film Iowa, Produce Iowa, and also usually there's a location database in there, and there's almost always a human that's part of that department, even though, you know, some places it's Iowa, it's like one person that you can contact and be like, hey, I'm trying to make a movie. This is the scale that I'm at. Because as long as you're upfront and honest, they're not going to try and mess around with you. And like, they're not going to send you somewhere that they know is going to ask you for a ton of money. And they're not going to send you like crew recommendations that aren't going to fit for a no budget.
Yeah.
They're only going to send you people that are a good fit. So Produce Iowa was a great resource for us. The former film commissioner of Iowa, Liz Gilman, because it wasn't really film commissioner, they called her something else, but she was a huge like resource for all of my first films that were made here, because she knew everyone, knows everyone, and like really understood the process. And I'm sure the person who's stepping into her position is going to be the same way. But there's a Liz Gilman figure in almost every state. That I think is one of the biggest resources that people think is just for big movies, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's for everybody.
And that sentiment is something I think is important, which is don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Right. Don't be afraid to ask for help from organizations like that.
Yeah.
Because just for a case study sort of point here, for the short we made titled Knee High and the feature, our location was found on that location database. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it works.
Yeah, it works. Also, I feel like, yeah. And also, like, we had options for that location because of that database. Like,
Mm-hmm.
even the most obscure place you could think of, they probably got one on there.
Yeah.
Because they just go out, they send somebody out to, like, take photos
Mm-hmm.
of different locations and, like, try to make contact with someone so they have those contacts.
Yeah.
And they've, like, established some sort of relationship with those people.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to just start with a basic Google search of film resources in your region or your
Yeah.
area, because most states will have a film office, and even some will be regional. There'll
Yeah.
be regional film offices for
Mhm.
certain areas of the United States. So really, these resources are there for you to use them. And from our experience, and you tell me if I'm wrong, it seemed like when we used them, they were very happy we were using said resources as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great because it's good for them and it's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, if you're using the resource, that means that you're likely telling other people about the resource, as we are currently doing.
Yes.
Which means that the system is working. All the people, all the places that they have in those databases are potentially going to get booked, going to get business, going to get to be part of something,
Mm-hmm.
that's their whole purpose.
Yes.
That's their whole purpose.
And also, don't underestimate the power of people wanting to be involved in a film, because it's cool.
It's cool.
It's fun.
It's cool.
It's mysterious.
Yeah, it's so mysterious.
Especially to people who don't make them.
Yeah.
And it's not, I think, once again, we talked about this earlier. We're not trying to take advantage of people.
No.
And that's not what you're trying to do when you first start. But it is okay. That's Bodie. Bodie's our podcast co-host.
Your mascot.
You're not trying to take advantage of people. You're not trying to get one over on people, but you are trying to use the resources you have in a way that benefits you, right? So it is kind of a fine line. But when you first starting, it doesn't really make sense to drop $10,000, $20,000 on these shorts. And can you talk about that mentality? Like, why low, no budget when we first started? Why does that make sense?
Because you could fail. And you have to know that, and you have to recognize that going into it. I will briefly talk about the before times, even though I said I wouldn't. Not the very, like, post-college second short film that I made, I did spend money on, like, too much money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not good. It's simply not good to me, looking back on it. And it, like, didn't have a successful run. And it was, like, because that was still something, like, the training wheels were still on. Like, I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I just want to tell this story, and I want to learn, and I'm such a do it on location person. You know that.
Yeah.
And instead of being in my own backyard, which was a great place that had the same problems, I was like, I gotta go to where I pictured the story in my head, which is not even the state that I live in. And so it cost a lot of money the movie exists. I did finish the task. Is it the best that it could have been? No, because I was just learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the risk to outcome ratio, you have to, like, think about that. And if it's your first handful of films and what you're doing is trying to learn and become better at the thing that you want to be doing long term, weigh that before you put in a lot of money. I think
because there's almost no return on investment for shorts.
There's truly, genuinely not. Unless you are some sort of magical wizard that has figured that out already before you even make the movie, there's not.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because they're a great, like, training ground.
Yeah.
They're
or
a great
calling card.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or a great education.
Yep.
They're a great masterclass.
Yes.
Every time. Because especially, I think short films is, like, a very specific art form, because to make a good short film, the story has to rip. It's got to be so good, because everybody's making short films.
Yes.
Because of this exact reason. You can do them short, they're short. You can do them quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so gratifying to, like, it's done. I can put it out. That's why people love the 48-hour film festival.
Mm-hmm.
But for a short film to be good, the story and the script have to be tight, and they have to be good, and they have to have a beginning, middle, and end. And that's what every single one is a masterclass, because it's like you have to make so many choices. And even though it's a smaller scale than when you're on a feature and you have less time and blah, 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 they're almost more important making those decisions during a short film because there's so much less screen real estate, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think there's some important thoughts in there. And one that we want to also kind of as sidebar say is if you want to invest money into a short and you believe it, you should not do it because of us. So
Right.
because of what we're saying.
Right. No, spend it when you know. If it's like you know that you're going to tell an important story that you like have to tell and you have to tell it like a very high level, spend the money. You're going to get the story out and it's going to do what you need it to do. But think about it. Just weigh that ratio.
Weigh your options.
Weigh your options. Yeah. Apply for a short film grant. Apply for grants.
Yes, that's. I'm so glad you said that.
Apply for grants.
That's another thing that you can look into with those local, state, and regional film offices. A lot of people will have a grant program.
Yes.
We have in Iowa the Greenlight Grant Program, and you can get up to $50,000 with a 50% match to make a film.
Yeah.
That means that you're using only 50% of your own funds to do that. And for your first proof of concepts or your first shorts, that is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Try to use someone else's
money.
Yes, when you can.
And the first one you're not going to be able to. You're going to have to you will have to pay for the food for your crew.
Yes.
Which pay for the food for your crew.
Yeah,
and make sure everybody eats good.
Feed them well because that will probably be their one source of payment for the short.
And also that's what they're going to remember.
Yeah, totally.
It's so true. People remember, did the lunches suck?
Yep.
Were the lunches good? We're very simple as a species. We're just thinking about food.
Get them good food.
Yeah.
Get them good food. And also think about it. I think it's important to think about this process also in terms of health and well-being. And you want your crew to have energy. You want them to have the sustenance they need to be able to actually complete the task at hand.
Yeah. And you have to think about the longevity of that. Don't feed them something horrible on day one. And don't feed them something horrible at all, but the rest of the shoot has to happen.
Yeah. Which is a great, as another point of indie filmmaking, which is take care of your people, right?
Yeah, which I think is something that indies do better than big budgets.
Yeah.
Which I said at the beginning.
They're intimate, smaller crews,
yeah.
But take into account that you have humans working for you. Take into account that they're giving you their time and energy.
Yeah.
And really try to make the process easy on them whenever you can, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, this is a business of people and interpersonal communications and interpersonal relationships in a kind of a constricting environment sometimes.
Yeah, and there's always at some point in your career, there's always going to be a contentious moment. It's just bound to happen because that's life.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the process. But you can move on.
Yeah.
You can remember that they're people and you just talk it out and you move on and you don't take it personal.
Yes. Yes. So going back to the beginning here, because I think a lot of shorts are made or not made in pre-production, right? Marissa and I love pre-production. It's actually my favorite part of the process because it's where you get to make the movie for the first time.
Yeah.
What sort of techniques, tactics, approaches did you find that really worked for you when in pre-production for these no budget, low budget shorts?
I think the biggest thing for me is figuring out what I want before, honestly, almost before I even send it to anybody else. Because you can't really talk about a movie if you don't know what you want it to be. If you don't know, how do you want it to feel? How do you want it to look? What's the vision? And I think pre-pro is such a huge part of crafting the vision. Because a lot of times I'll come to you and I've already done a shot list. Or I've already made a pitch deck of some sort, or made some sort of lookbook. Just because for me, it's a really integral part of the process to making sure that the film even works. I could write a script and I'd be like, yeah, the script makes sense. But if I can't see it, then it's not going to work. If I can't see where it takes place and see the textures, the colors, all of the things, then how am I supposed to tell you what I want out of the movie or what the movie's supposed to be? So I think, this is like a relatively new, I think, Canva, Google Sheets, that type of stuff
Mm-hmm.
for like putting together some sort of visual representation of your movie,
Yes.
like a digital collage.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Or a
been,
lookbook.
yeah, that's been like the most integral thing for me, is like building something like that so that when I'm talking about the movie, I can show them, because
Yeah.
movies are show don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just give your people this, be like, do you want to help tell this story? This is what it's going to be like.
We've talked a lot about best practices. Is there anything that you want to put out there that really hasn't worked? Like pitfalls to avoid? And we've kind of touched upon some of them, which is like keep your story somewhat simple, few characters,
Yeah.
make it doable, make it so you can actually produce the movie. But is there anything that you've tried that just you've seen not work for you?
I mean, lots of things have not worked.
Yeah.
Lots of things have not worked. I think there's something to be said about, like, especially now when the playing field is a lot more level, don't fall into the trap of a fancy camera.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Like, use what you have.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I was like, it's because you want it. If you see all the movies are shooting on the big camera, it doesn't matter. Everything can look so good. Your cell phone can look so good, and you have it. And you'll probably know who said the thing, like, the best camera is the one you have.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever cinematographer said that is right.
Yes.
Like, whatever you have, shoot on it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about the Ari. Don't worry about the Red, the Burano, whatever is new. Just worry about what you have. And can you shoot something on it? Can you complete a project with it?
Yep.
Fuck yeah, shoot on that.
Mm-hmm. So we have talked so much about shorts that I just want to hear from you. What makes a good short stand out? When you see a short that you know is really good and it hits you emotionally,
Yeah.
what are those things that are causing that to happen?
Have you seen the short film Caroline?
I don't believe so.
It came out a few years ago. I'm gonna mess up. I can't. The director is doing bigger things now, and her first name is, I want to say it was Celine. It's either Celine. There's three Celines. There's Celine Song. There's Celine Sciamma, and there's Celine Held, and I can't remember if it was Celine Held or Celine Sciamma. It's one of them. They're all great, and the short is about a little girl and her little brother, and they are shut in a hot car while mom is doing something.
Great start.
Great start. That's a short film that, like, has stayed with me. And, like, actually the reason I saw it is because my dad saw it.
Interesting.
Which is weird. He doesn't go on the movie part of the internet. I don't know where he saw it, but he was like, have you seen this? Like, if my dad likes it, it's done something right. But it's like, it's a very simple story. It's told very straightforward. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. This is going to sound like a roast, and it's not, but there's nothing special about it. Like, it's not shot in a fancy way. It's not like, there's nothing groundbreaking about it. But the story and the performances are, like, so specific. And I think that's what it is the specificity. So, like, a good short needs to be specific.
On a personal level, like on a spiritual level, what advice do you have for people who are like, how do I start? What do I do?
Like, starting from the ideation of it, you have to trust yourself. And then when you get to the creation of it, you have to trust the people that you found. And that's, like, it's very hard, especially when it's your first one and it's like, this is my first thing. This is my first attempt at something that I want to do long term. This is my first time trying something that I think I'm really going to love. But you have to trust yourself in the ideation and trust the story all the way through. And always remember that, is that trust the story. Because if it got you this far, it's going to get you the rest of the way. So always lean into what serves the story and what is going to make the story shine.
That ending sentiment is what wraps up this episode. which is that you should trust yourself and you should trust the story. And if you do that, you'll be just fine.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to put out there to the podcast world about no budget, low budget indies? Any other piece of advice you have?
Not after that really good wrap up of trust yourself, trust
I mean,
the story.
you killed it.
That was a good one.
That was it.
Like, that was it.
Like, if this was a short film, that would be
That would be it. That would be the log line.
Yeah, there we go.
Done.
Well, thank you so much, Marissa, for
Thank you.
taking some time to speak with us on That's a Take. This is the first inaugural episode.
This is take one.
This is take one.
Are you going to name the episodes that?
I mean, now I am going to.
That's actually really cute. I like that.
But we do end every podcast with, I'm Bruce James Bales, and That's a Take.